starting again. God's abundance. Joel S. Goldsmith, author of The Art of Meditation, The Art of Spiritual Healing, Practicing the Presence, The Infinite Way, and The Thunder of Silence. All books we should all have in our library. Some time ago, one of our students brought to my attention a passage from an early edition of a well-known encyclopedia which referred to the uranium found abundantly in a certain mountain as, quote, a worthless metal, end quote. That was the way scientists evaluated this much sought-after mineral some years ago. These many people who place no value upon uranium might have wondered how an infinite and all-intelligent God wasted time placing anything so worthless in the ground. You may recall, too, that there was a time when oil was also considered a useless bit of liquid, usually found beneath the surface of the earth. But in the infinite wisdom of God, an abundance of everything necessary, not only for the ancient of ancients and for us here today, but for all those who may ever come after us, has been provided. Your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things, and it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. When we learn to relax in that assurance, we open the way to bring spiritual harmony, spiritual good into our experience, a spiritual harmony which appears in due order as the forms necessary to our experience. When we sit in quiet, peace, and calm, realizing that God is forever pouring itself into visible manifestation, we rest in the assurance that it is already done. We do not ask God to do it at some future time, but rest in God's omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience. God is already performing its functions. God is eternally bringing forth the cattle on 1,000 hills, the crops in the ground, the iron, gold, silver, copper, and oil, and all the things that not only are needed today, but which will ever be needed. If we want to enjoy the sunshine, we go out of doors and find ourselves flooded with sunshine. When we want to go swimming, we can jump in a pool of water and immediately find ourselves surrounded with water. We don't have to ask, beg, or plead with the sun or the water. So it is with the goodness of God. We do not have to plead with God or beg Him for the abundance with which He has provided this earth. It is all ours now by divine right, ever available right where we are. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. And Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. I'd like to just add something here. When we hear Joel talking about the Father and quoting the Bible with the Son, we know that there isn't a personification of spirit. And, many times I wish he hadn't done it, but his audience was very biblically oriented. And so coming from Christianity, coming from Christian Science, he's repeating phrases in the Bible. This sometimes bothers women because it's so male-oriented. But I'd like to just propose something if that does happen. I don't I don't like it because it's it's a repetition of duality, father, mother, son, daughter. So that's what annoys me, but not the maleness of it all. What came to mind just now as I was reading it is that we women have to remember that we have had incarnations as men. So just know that you are both. You are man and you are woman. You are son and you are daughter. So he is talking to us if we have the right perspective. Don't let that irritate. Just a note, a side note. Okay, so here's another article. Towards Spiritual Illumination, Joel S. Goldsmith, author of The Infinite Way, Art of Meditation, Spiritual Healing, Practicing the Presence, and the Thunder of Sun. Most of us begin our search for God with all the failings of human beings, racial, religious, national, and personal. Despite these handicaps, however, we embark on this search because we've been awakened and it's been revealed to us that there is something beyond mere social, political, or economic attainment. Something tells us that there is such a thing as God's grace. So we set forth on this spiritual path and remain on it, difficult and frustrating as it is, and we stay on it because something within us says, this is truth and I must attain it. That is the experience of most of us. We go through many very hard, difficult years without turning back because there's a song in our heart which assures us that this is truth, even though we cannot prove it. Day by day, problems arise. Sometimes the same problems over and over again, or new ones. Or we get rid of a certain problem only to find that others have taken its place. Discouragement may creep in with its familiar, what's the use? But the answer comes back as it must have come to the disciples. Where shall we go? Thou hast the word of truth. As difficult as it is, we continue on the spiritual path because it is the only way for us to go. We cannot go back to our old material reliances, even though there may be recourse to them at times, because few there are who can make a complete demonstration in a day. But we know that despite every hindrance, we must go forward. Always there have been steps on the path of spiritual realization. For this reason, Moses gave the Hebrews the 10 Commandments, but Jesus found a higher preparation for his message, so that he could do away with 9 of those commandments and could substitute for those 9 just 2, in which were embraced the essence of the 9 that he had omitted. To understand why the 2 commandments of Jesus embrace the entire 10 commandments, one must realize that when a person comes to a measure of spiritual light, he has lost the capacity to steal, lie, cheat, defraud, or envy, and commandments forbidding such actions are no longer necessary. So instead of teaching the 10 commandments, the Master gave us the Sermon on the Mount, knowing full well that if a person lived according to the Sermon on the Mount, he would have no need for any thou shalt not, because temptations in those forms would not enter his consciousness. That does not mean that there will not be temptations, but they will be of a different nature. To the enlightened consciousness, temptations come in the form of deep personal sense. Students believe that by the time they've attained some measure of spiritual demonstration, there are no further temptations for them to meet. But that's not true, because when that point is reached, all the temptations of the world will resolve themselves into those which are the outgrowth of personal sense. There is a principle which will help to free you from personal sense and thereby help you to gain spiritual illumination. This principle is the impersonalization of good and evil. To impersonalize evil means to recognize all evil as but a sense of separation from God, a universal belief in two powers. Because inasmuch as God is the infinite all, there is no person through whom, as whom, or upon whom evil can operate. In impersonalizing evil, you must break down the belief that you are suffering from violating a law, or that there is any mental or physical cause for your difficulties. To impersonalize good means to realize that good, any form of good or any way in which it appears, is an emanation of God. Then our expectancy is from God, not from man whose breath is in his nostrils. For example, good may flow through me to you, and through you to me, but that good is not from me to you, and it is not from you to me. Whatever it is of good that is flowing in your direction through me is God drawing unto you your own, and I am but an instrument being used for that purpose. I'm not really important to you, because no matter what happens to me, if as you do not look to me or depend upon me, the next instrument will appear in your experience, as long as an instrument of any kind is needed. Never feel reluctant or sad to see some form of good leave your experience, because as long as your expectancy is of good, this apparent void is but making room for a greater good. When you realize that His grace is your sufficiency in all things, you must be sure that you are not thinking in terms of a man or a woman appearing as that grace. Moses in the desert long, long years ago, or somebody up in an airplane today would, in either case, be a very serious position if he looked to man, whose breath is in his nostrils, to give him help, because the particular man needed might not be there. In fact, there might be no human help available, but for those who realize God as the source of all good, God can set a table in the wilderness, if they look to God's grace as their sufficiency in all things. Nothing is beyond your means or your capacity, if only you realize that the source is God. The source is not your investments. The source is not the size of your salary. The source is not your husband's income. The source is not your physical strength. The source is God. To realize that is to impersonalize good, and thereby have it eternally. When you learn never to expect good of a person and never to expect evil from anyone, you will have taken a big step forward on the path leading to spiritual illumination. Now we'll go to Between Two Worlds by Joel S. Goldsmith, May 10th, 1964, Honolulu, Hawaii. Relax and let the mental strain fall away, because we wish to be transparencies through which the Spirit can flow. Remember, you're not here to get anything. When we have large lecture audiences, it is to be expected that many people come to receive something, or to gain something, or to learn something. This is legitimate, just as it is legitimate when we first come to a metaphysical teaching to seek something in the outer realm. Better health, or increased supply, or improved relationships. However, in a small group of this nature, you have at least in some measure learned that anything you're going to get is only in proportion to the flow of the Spirit. Therefore, your mind should not be on achieving something or learning something, but rather resting in the assurance that there is a Spirit in man. Let the Spirit flow, and the Spirit that flows through you will feed you. But it will do something far more than that, because it will feed each one of us. What feeds me will continue to feed you. What feeds you will continue to feed me. What feeds us will feed those in this room. And because the flow of Spirit cannot be limited or stopped, it will continue to flow out of this room into the world. Just as the life of the tree not only feeds the tree but produces fruit on the tree, so it is in our spiritual life. We no longer think in terms of feeding me and my family, but we let it produce enough fruit to feed the world. Relax and take this as a law to remember. The only tension there is in meditation is when you are trying to get something. The moment you release the desire to get, you will relax. A little now about our trip. In Portland, Seattle, and Chicago, Mrs. Daisy Sugamore of Hawaii, Mrs. Eileen Bowden of Canada, Miss Lorraine McClintock of New York, Mrs. Virginia Stevenson of California, and Miss Lorraine Sinkler of Chicago will be conducting Infinite Way teaching classes on meditation, spiritual healing, and ways and means of studying the monthly letter. Those will be in addition to my own lecture and classwork. So it will be a heavy program, but one that will bring forth a deep and rich consciousness. I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. Therefore, as our Infinite Way group is lifted up, the Spirit will go beyond the confines of the walls and reach human consciousness. In Europe, our editor, Miss Lorraine Sinkler, will join Emma, Daisy Sugamora, and me. And in addition to my lecture and classwork, there Miss Sugamora and Miss Sinkler will have programs on meditation, healing work, and specific principles of daily living. Infinite Way teachers from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa will also join us in England, as will teachers from Germany, Holland, and Switzerland. Furthermore, about 30 students from the United States expect to be part of our group in Europe. So there is going to be a tremendous uniting on this Infinite Way safari. Most of those are individuals who have dedicated themselves to meditation and to the understanding of God. The Infinite Way is really only a means to that, and because their main goal is God realization, this way of life offers them that opportunity. You can be assured that there will be a rich consciousness functioning constantly, and there's no reason why you should not participate. Why? Because consciousness, the consciousness of the I am, which you are, is not related to the body. It is not inside of or confined to a body. Actually, this consciousness that I am is omnipresent where you are. Spiritual consciousness, enlightened consciousness, Christ consciousness cannot be confined to a body. Therefore, you can contact it wherever it is. The consciousness that is manifest in this room at this moment is likewise manifest in Cape Town, South Africa, Australia, New York, or London. This principle is so universally recognized by the illumined that the Order of Elks maintains an activity whereby members unite once a day in silent prayer. whether they are in Hawaii or in Africa or in New York, New York, showing that they recognize the one consciousness. A Masonic body meets daily to unite in this one consciousness, and there are religious groups where provision is made for their members to unite in the one consciousness at specific hours throughout the day and night. And there are prayer groups operating throughout the world which have been organized by religious and non-religious groups to unite at certain times for spiritual prayer. In the infinite way, we go a step further. We recognize this divine consciousness as omnipresence, and therefore we do not set aside a specific time to unite with it. Why? Because it is always omnipresent. I am in meditation 24 hours a day, even when I'm asleep. It is not my personal human consciousness that benefits you, but my personal consciousness, which is in oneness with the divine. As you realize that infinite way groups are meeting 2-3 times a day in Hawaii, New York, Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, on the European continent, and in the Orient, you will come to see that such groups are meeting almost 24 hours a day. Therefore, you can close your eyes at any time and realize your oneness with divine consciousness, and eventually you will discover that as you do learn to close your eyes, you will find the practitioner consciousness omnipresent. In that way, the entire element of personal healing will gradually be illuminated. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee, and it makes no difference whether it was 2,000 years ago or today. Therefore, there is no reason why you cannot unite morning, noon, and night in that realized Christ consciousness wherever we are. And certainly there must be signs following. Let me repeat that prayer in the ordinary sense of the word. Let me repeat that prayer in the ordinary sense of the word is an attempt to accomplish the impossible, because it is an attempt to get God or Spirit to give us something material, and this cannot be successful. The reason for unanswered prayer, as prayer is generally understood, is in the belief that there is a God and something that God has to give. This denies infinity and omnipresence. If God is infinite, there is nothing besides God. So to think of health or supply or success as being something separate and apart from God is to deny God's allness. Any prayer that looks to God for anything is a form of paganism, because it is a denial of the nature of God, the function of God, and the name of God. Think, there is no you separate and apart from God. Therefore, there can be nothing for God to give you, since all things that the Father hath are mine. All that the Father hath is included within you, and to pray for something would be like this tumbler praying for glass. You cannot pray aright without an understanding of the name or nature of God. And you do not have this understanding if you are praying to mental concepts of God. In other words, if you pray to God who is spirit, or if you pray to God as mind or life or soul, your ignorance of the name and nature of God prevents the success of your prayers. But to know God aright is life eternal. So you might as well decide to leave the Bible alone until you have fulfilled that one passage. Why? Because without an inner awareness of that passage of truth, the rest of the Bible is meaningless. To know God aright does not mean to know another name or another meaning for God. No, it means to know God. to be aware of God, to be conscious of God, and to know God as God is. Yes, actually, to experience God. If we are to live the life of a contemplative, whereby we live by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God, then contemplation or meditation must be the means of our approach to God. And since we've taken the passage, to know Him aright is life eternal, this must be the subject of contemplative meditation until a second passage of Scripture projects itself into consciousness. If you continue long enough in knowing God aright, I can tell you what the next passage will be. The voice will say, "Be still and know that I am God." After this second passage reveals itself to you, what kind of praying do you depends upon how forcefully the passage enters your thought. Think, if I am God, this I is already closer than breathing. And because we have discovered that its nature is omniscience, the all-knowing, it must already know your needs. Its nature is omnipresence. So you need you need go nowhere to contact it. And because it is omnipotence, there's no power to oppose its will. What else is there to do but be still? If your child were ill or in trouble, what greater love could you display than to sit down, be still, and let the presence of God do its work? Let the love of God be made manifest. Let the power of God flow. Do you not see how egotistical it would be to go further and do something for your child or for your patient or for your friend? As you contemplate and meditate on the nature of prayer, it will not be long before those passages unfold. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. Take no thought for your life. Acknowledge Him in all thy ways. My peace I give unto you. Thy grace is my sufficiency. Think of the depth and the power of your prayer when it becomes a silence based on the understanding that I am God. I, in the midst of thee, am mighty. For centuries, it's been a complete waste of time to tell God what we want, how much we want, or when we want it. And there's nothing more nonsensical than prayers for peace on earth. There can be no peace on earth until there is a peace in my individual consciousness and yours. And there will be no peace in my consciousness or yours unless God is there. Otherwise, there's always a conflict between yourself and myself, or his self and herself. In the infinite way, it is recognized that I is God. Only then can there be no discord or strife between us, because there is only one consciousness. Peace on earth will only come about with the universal recognition of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man. With that recognition, there can be no strife, because it then makes no difference what church we go into or what church we stay out of. The cause of more than 1/2 of the wars on earth can be attributed to religious conflicts. Always religious struggle has caused war. The other cause of warfare is money, or business, or prosperity. You may have read of many causes of World War I, but none of those reports were true. The only reason for World War I was industry, competition between England and the German Empire. There was also but one reason for World War II. The Allies did not allow the defeated Germans to get back on their feet. In other words, there was a determination to make of the defeated German nation a peasant race and withhold from them their industrial Rhine and Ruhr areas, which were restored only through war. Materialistic concepts of life, both in religion and industry, are the cause of warfare. Likewise, if we here were to have personal quarrels, they would be caused by religion or money. But once we come into an agreement that there is only one God, no longer can there be religious strife. And once we have attained a spiritual concept of supply, there can never be a disagreement between us concerning money. How much money or how little money each of us has is then of no interest, and what passes between us is free will. This can be observed in families. When there is no religious disagreement or no economic disagreement, there's no unhappiness, and what measure of tribulations do arise are only little peccadilloes which come up and quickly disappear. If one were to judge by the newspapers, one might be led to believe that infidelity is the cause of broken homes. But do not believe it. Infidelity is not a cause but an effect, and when there is an agreement to let each other live in his or her financial and religious life, there's no reason for infidelity. The same thing happens and applies to alcohol and drugs. These are not causes, but the effects of economic or religious disagreement. Prayer reinstates the original harmony when prayer is a be still. So let us follow that thought. There are about 40 or 50 of us gathered together today, and let us now agree that there are 40 or 50 different states of consciousness and two sexes. Therefore, discords of one name or another could enter this group. So let us see how we would resolve them and how we would maintain harmony thereafter. First, let us agree that there is a transcendental something called the Buddha mind or spiritual consciousness, or the mind that was also in Jesus Christ. Let us agree that there is something of a transcendental nature, and that prayer or meditation is the means of bringing it into expression in our midst. We close our eyes and bring to conscious remembrance. Be still and know that I, here in the center of your being, is God. Be still and know that I, in the center of being of every individual being here, is God. Be still and let the divine will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let the peace, my peace, descend upon us and be released among us. Let God's grace flow in and through us. Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. We are then completely still, and eventually we feel the deep breath, the flow, the spiritual quiet. What happens now to discord, hate, bigotry, bias, jealousy? Few students can attain this realization of the presence during their first contemplation or meditation, which is why spiritual principles must be studied and practiced. It may take years before a student is able to settle down in quiet and in confidence. But however long it takes, I can assure you it is worthwhile. Why? Because the minute a student brings that peace of God into a situation, in the home or in the business or in the schoolroom, it dissolves opposition. There are now 3 major national problems in the United States. namely 1, civil rights, which has to do with race, segregation; 2, prayer in the schools, which has to do with religion; and 3, income taxes, which have to do with money. Think what a nation there would be if these were eliminated. Is there a reason for those 3 problems? None at all. There's a way of attaining success according to the human standard of success, which is to divide and to conquer. In other words, keep the country divided racially, keep the people highly taxed. That's always been the human picture, and it cannot be brought to an end by changing the political party from Republican to Democrat or from Democrat to Republican. The only change will come through prayer, the prayer that does not ask for anything or for anyone, the prayer that is quietness and confidence and stillness in this realization. There is no power in heaven or on earth greater than I am. Thank you, Joel. And so let us go into our universe prayer. Move a little bit above your head, looking down on your body's sting. Acknowledge the I am of that body. And now do the same for the family members in your home. Pets and plants as well. Move a bit further up to your town. Know the truth of the people in that town, the I, the be. Now, for your state, the country, I. Now the globe, if you like, embrace it in your lap, knowing the I am of each continent. I am in the air. I am under the sea. I. Now do this for the solar system, all the planets. Whatever life exists, is active, I. Do it for the galaxy in which we're contained, all the other stars and planets, I. And our universe. And they'll make it disappear. Right in the eye. I am that I. There's no power in heaven or on earth greater than I.